Machiavelli would expect all of these tests. He would tell you, the closer someone stands, the more they expect you to absorb their chaos. And if you don't, they will call you cold. They will say you're different. They will frame your growth as betrayal. But you must understand, that reaction is not proof that you've done wrong. It's proof that you've stopped being exploited. And if you flinch, if you fold, if you run back to the old version of yourself just to silence their complaints, you've lost the game before it even began. These 5 tests, entitlement, guilt, loyalty, convenience, and accusation, are not random. They are the natural ways people probe for weakness. They want to know, will you enforce or will you excuse? Will you protect your standard or will you bend it? Will you stay unpredictable or will you remain soft, safe, and exploitable? Each test you pass builds fear and respect. Each one you fail builds entitlement and exploitation. And the man who refuses to see these tests for what they are will end his life wondering why he gave so much love and received so little respect. To the average man, the phrase cold-blooded sounds cruel. It sounds like the absence of compassion, the rejection of love, the refusal to care. But Machiavelli never defined it that way. To be cold-blooded in his eyes was not to abandon emotion. It was to master it. It was to recognize that unchecked love blinds, unchecked loyalty weakens, and unchecked kindness invites exploitation. Being cold-blooded is not the end of love, it is the containment of it. You still love, but within boundaries sharp enough to cut. You still forgive, but only when the standard is met. You still give, but never at the expense of your position. It is not cruelty. It is precision. And in a world where people test, push, and probe for weakness, precision is the only armor that keeps you standing. Think about the man who leads with love alone. He is endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. At first, people praise him for his warmth. They tell him how noble he is, how kind, how selfless. But over time, the praise fades and entitlement grows. Soon his kindness is no longer seen as generosity, it is seen as duty. His forgiveness is no longer respected, it is expected. And when he finally reaches his limit, when he finally dares to say no, the people around him don't thank him for all the years of sacrifice. Instead, they turn on him. They call him selfish, cold, cruel. Why? Because he broke the very pattern they had grown addicted to. His kindness became a drug, and when he stopped supplying it, they called it betrayal. That is the cost of leading with love alone. Now look at the man who is cold-blooded. He loves, but with a ceiling. He forgives, but only with reform. He gives, but never without calculation. His love is not a faucet running endlessly. It is a well with a gate. And only those who respect the gate are allowed to drink. This man is not cold because he hates. He is cold because he understands that warmth without walls turns to weakness. His silence is not apathy, it is strategy. When he withholds, when he pauses, when he chooses not to react, he forces others to face themselves. His detachment becomes a mirror, reflecting back the truth of who they are when they no longer have unlimited access to his energy. And in that reflection, respect is either rebuilt, or the relationship is exposed for what it truly was, dependence, not devotion. Machiavelli warned, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Most people misinterpret this. They imagine dictators, tyrants, men who crush others under cruelty. But that is not the lesson. Fear in this context is not terror, it is awareness. It is the silent recognition that your boundaries are unshakable, that your withdrawal carries weight, that losing you has consequences. Love without fear is weak. Fear without love is tyranny. The balance is found when your presence inspires warmth, but your absence inspires caution. That is what it means to lead with leverage instead of love. Consider your own life. How many times have you given second, third, fourth chances to people who never earned them? How many times have you swallowed your anger to keep the peace, only to realize the peace you were keeping was nothing more than everyone else's comfort with your weakness? How many times have you gone back to the same patterns, the same conversations, the same toxic cycles, because you feared being seen as cold, distant, or harsh? Every time you chose warmth over clarity, you taught people they could cross you without consequence, and every time they did, they respected you less. The cold-blooded solution is to invert that dynamic. to make your boundaries cost something, to make your forgiveness selective, to make your access conditional, not because you hate, but because you value yourself too highly to be used. When people call you harsh, you understand that it's not cruelty they're seeing. It's the loss of their ability to exploit you. When they call you distant, it's not distance they're mourning. It's the disappearance of their unearned access. And when they call you heartless, it's not your heart they miss. It's the version of you that absorbed their chaos without question. Machiavelli would tell you, let them call you what they want. Their words are not truth. They are confessions of what they lost when you became precise. To be cold-blooded is not to stop loving. It is to love with discipline. It is to measure your warmth and to wield it like a weapon, not spill it like water. It is to show compassion when it aligns with your standards, not when it is demanded. It is to forgive when behavior has changed, not simply because someone cries. It is to remain silent, not to avoid conflict, but to create pressure that reveals character. Cold-bloodedness is not about cruelty. It is about leverage, and leverage is the true currency of power. The world tells you to lead with love, but Machiavelli would tell you, lead with leverage and love will follow. Because when people know you cannot be bent, when they see that your warmth has limits, when they realize that losing you is a consequence they cannot afford, they begin to respect the privilege of your love. They begin to treat your loyalty as rare instead of assumed. They begin to guard your trust instead of testing it. And in that shift, you reclaim control. So the question is not whether you will love or not. The question is whether your love will be strategic or blind. Blind love is slavery. Strategic love is power. The choice is yours. Rules are the spine of power. Without them, you drift into the expectations of others, pulled in every direction by guilt, loyalty, or desire. With them, you anchor yourself in clarity. Machiavelli understood that intimacy is not a place where rules should soften. It's where rules must sharpen, because the closer someone is to you, the more power they have to exploit you. And the only way to preserve balance is to design principles so clear, so unshakable, that no argument, no tear, no manipulation can break them. These are not suggestions, they are laws. And if you cannot enforce them, you will never control the relationships that matter most. Rule number 1. Never explain your distance. The weak man feels guilty for creating space. He withdraws, but then he justifies it. I've just been busy. It's nothing personal. I just need time. And every word he speaks bleeds leverage. Why? Because explanation invites negotiation. The moment you explain, you invite someone to argue with your reasoning, to poke holes in your logic, to push you back into access. Machiavelli would say, power moves without permission. Silence is stronger than 1,000 excuses. When they ask, why are you distant? The cold-blooded strategist replies with one sentence, I've recalibrated. Nothing more. The absence of justification creates pressure. That silence forces them to sit with their own behavior, to consider their own role rather than debating yours. Explaining is bleeding. Acting is power. Rule number 2, don't set conditions, set consequences. Listen to the average man in conflict. He pleads, please don't talk to me that way. Don't do this again, it hurts me. If you love me, you won't cross this line. These are conditions, fragile requests dependent on the goodwill of others. And goodwill is the weakest form of control. Machiavelli would never beg for better behavior. He would design structures that make disrespect costly. You don't say, don't disrespect me. You show them that when disrespect happens, you vanish. Not for an hour, not until they panic. You vanish until you decide. You make them feel the weight of losing your presence, your support, your access. Boundaries are not lines drawn in sand. They are costs etched in stone. And the man who enforces costs without hesitation is the man who commands fear and respect. Rule number 3, never negotiate through emotion. This is where most men collapse. They can remain calm in logic, but the moment tears, anger, or silence enter the room, they fold. They rush to fix. They rush to soothe. They rush to prove they are not heartless. But Machiavelli knew this. Once your emotions become a bargaining chip, your mind is no longer the target. Your wounds are. And anyone who can steer your decisions through emotional storms owns you. Cold-blooded power requires stillness. No long text messages defending yourself. No, I just feel like monologues. No panicked re-entry after being ignored. You become unreadable. Your silence becomes your leverage. Your calm becomes your armor. When others spiral, your stillness becomes terrifying, because they realize their usual weapons no longer work. They told you that love was the highest virtue, the one force strong enough to conquer betrayal, silence fear, and turn enemies into allies. You were told that if you poured enough of your heart into others, they would naturally respond with loyalty, with gratitude, with respect. From childhood, society drilled into you the same script: love deeply, forgive quickly, stay soft, and eventually the world will mirror back that warmth. But Niccolo Machiavelli, the man who spent his life dissecting human nature, would smirk at this idea. Because what you see as love, the world often sees as leverage. What you offer as unconditional acceptance, others quietly file away as exploitable access. And every time you give more than you guard, you build a system where you are predictable. Predictable in your forgiveness, predictable in your return, predictable in your willingness to bleed for others. And predictability is the single most dangerous trait in any power game. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable. Why? Because predictability kills fear. And once fear leaves a relationship, respect does too. It doesn't matter if the relationship is with your closest friend, your romantic partner, or even your family. When they know that you'll always bend, always forgive, always put their comfort above your standard, then your presence no longer carries weight. Instead, it becomes assumed, and assumed presence is invisible. That's the paradox. The warmer you are without boundaries, the colder people eventually become toward your value. Think about it. How many times have you justified someone else's behavior simply because of the role they play in your life? He's my brother, so I'll forgive him. She's my partner, so I'll overlook this. They've been my friends for years, so I can't pull back now. In each of those moments, you thought you were protecting the relationship, but what you were really doing was training them to see your love as unconditional, unchanging, no matter how much they take. And here's the brutal truth. Unconditional love is not interpreted as strength, it's interpreted as safety. Safe to take advantage of, safe to disrespect, safe to ignore when it's inconvenient. Machiavelli would argue that love by itself is blind. It blinds you to betrayal until it's too late. It blinds you to disrespect because you rationalize it away. It blinds you to shifting dynamics in relationships because you assume that if you would never betray them, they would never betray you. But blindness is not a luxury you can afford in a world where self-interest is the primary driver of action. In politics, in war, and yes, even in intimacy, self-interest outweighs sentiment. That doesn't mean people never love. It means people love selectively until their interest demands otherwise. And if your love is limitless, your position will always be the one sacrificed. Machiavelli was not against love. He understood its value as a social bond, a motivator, even a weapon. But he believed that love without boundaries was the equivalent of walking into battle without armor. It leaves you wide open to the very people you trust the most. Because make no mistake, the betrayals that cut deepest don't come from strangers. Strangers cannot break you. They do not know where your soft spots are. They do not know the words that wound you, the fears you carry, or the sacrifices you've made. Only the people closest to you know those things, and that makes them infinitely more dangerous than any declared enemy. The trap of love is not in love itself. It is in the illusion that love is enough. You believe that if you love harder, give more, stay patient longer, eventually the other side will wake up and appreciate your sacrifice. But rarely does that happen. Instead, the opposite unfolds. They grow comfortable. Comfortable with your silence when they cross the line. Comfortable with your forgiveness when they disappoint. Comfortable with your access, your loyalty, your willingness to absorb the chaos they refuse to face. And when comfort reaches its peak, entitlement is born. Entitlement says, you owe me this. Entitlement says, you will forgive me, because you always do. Entitlement says, I don't have to fear losing you because you've proven you will never leave. And entitlement is the soil where exploitation grows. Not always deliberate, not always malicious, but inevitable. Because when someone no longer fears the consequences of losing you, they stop respecting the privilege of having you. The moment your love becomes unconditional, so does your pain. That is the trap Machiavelli wanted you to see. Love without control doesn't protect you, it disarms you. And in the games of power, whether on the battlefield, in politics, or in your own home, the man who disarms himself will not survive. So here is the lesson. Love is not the enemy. Blindness is. Love without a ceiling, without calculation, without strategy, that is the path to destruction. You don't stop loving, but you stop assuming love will protect you. Because in truth, only fear, only respect, only boundaries can do that. And if you don't create those boundaries, the ones you love most will eventually test you. Not out of hate, but because you've shown them that your loyalty has no cost. And anything without cost is always taken for granted. Machiavelli would remind us that betrayal rarely arrives announced. It doesn't knock on your door declaring its intent. Instead, it creeps in disguised as small requests, subtle manipulations, and invisible shifts in how people treat you. Those closest to you will never launch a frontal attack. Why would they? They already have access to your trust, your patience, your forgiveness. What they do instead is test. They test to see how far they can push, how much they can take, and how little you will resist. Each test is a measure of your boundaries. Fail one, and the others follow. Pass them, and you shift the balance of power in your favor. The first test is the entitlement test. This is when someone close to you stops saying thank you. They stop asking for permission. They stop acknowledging the effort you put in. They begin to treat your generosity as a given, as if it were their right. Suddenly, showing up for them isn't seen as support, it's seen as duty. And when you finally hesitate, when you finally say no, they react with shock, even anger. They call you selfish, accuse you of changing, of becoming cold. But Machiavelli would say, let them call you what they wish. Because what they are really mourning is not the loss of your warmth, it is the loss of their unearned advantage. Entitlement is never about love, it is about control. And when you enforce your boundary, you reclaim it. The second test is the guilt reflex. This is perhaps the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of those who know you well. You set a boundary, and suddenly the conversation shifts. It's no longer about your right to protect yourself. Instead, it becomes about how much you're hurting them. You say no, they bring up everything they've done for you in the past. You protect your time, and they call you distant. You prioritize your peace, and they label you ungrateful. It's no longer dialogue, it's manipulation. Because once they learn that guilt can bend your decisions, they will use it again and again. The moment you flinch under the pressure of guilt, you surrender control. That isn't love anymore. It's emotional negotiation. And a man who cannot resist guilt will never be respected, because guilt exposes his weak spot like a flashing target. The third test is the loyalty loop. This is the silent erosion of balance in a relationship. You've been loyal, supportive, consistent, but because you've been so consistent, your loyalty is no longer seen as a gift. It's seen as the baseline. They stop checking in, they stop reciprocating, they stop investing effort because they assume you will always remain loyal regardless of their behavior. Your consistency has become their comfort. And when you finally step back, when you finally reduce your presence, they panic. Not because they love you, but because they've lost their insurance policy. Machiavelli would say, if your loyalty is predictable, it will be exploited before it is appreciated. Loyalty without balance is not loyalty, it's servitude. And when loyalty becomes servitude, it stops being respected altogether. The fourth test is the just this once trap. It starts small. Can you cover this? Can you cancel that for me? Can you overlook this mistake just this once? And of course, because you care, you agree. But the moment you give in, it is never just once. You've now proven that your values are flexible. You've shown that under the right emotional pressure, you can be bent. And once people learn that you bend, they will push further. That one time becomes the new normal. And soon you're not just making exceptions, you're living in them. Machiavelli would see this for what it is, not a mistake, but a strategic pressure. Because once someone knows you'll betray your own standards to keep them close, you've handed them the blueprint to control you. And nothing is more dangerous than teaching someone how to bend you. The fifth test is the too harsh defense. This one is cunning. The moment you enforce a standard, the moment you stop being endlessly patient, they don't argue with logic. They attack your character. You're too cold. You're too harsh. You're heartless. They flip your strength into sin. What they truly miss is not your kindness, but your lack of consequence. They want access to the version of you that absorbed everything without protest. And when that version disappears, they label you cruel. But cruelty is not the truth. Clarity is. The clearer your standards become, the more those who benefited from your softness will scream that you've changed. But that scream is not truth. It is evidence that your boundaries are working. Rule number 4. Define what you tolerate and never wobble. Weak men have boundaries that bend depending on who is asking. They let families slide with insults they'd never accept from strangers. They let partners cross lines they would never permit from friends. They shift their standards depending on the history of the relationship. But Machiavelli would call this weakness. A boundary that bends is not a boundary, it's a suggestion. And suggestions invite abuse. You need rules so black and white, so unwavering that no one dares to test them twice. For example, I don't respond to yelling. I don't reward apologies without changed behavior. When I set space, it remains until I decide. And when someone crosses those lines, your enforcement is surgical, cold, final. Because when people see you waver, they stop respecting your rules. But when they see you enforce without hesitation, they adapt, or they vanish. Either outcome strengthens you. Rule number 5. Don't fear the label of harsh. Fear only the label of easy. This is the trap that captures most men. They finally enforce a standard, finally say no, finally withdraw, and the backlash comes, you're cruel, you're arrogant, you're unforgiving. Society has trained you to fear these labels, to believe that if you're not endlessly patient, endlessly soft, endlessly giving, you are wrong. But Machiavelli didn't fear being called cold, he feared being seen as pliable. He feared being predictable, because the man who is easy to move is never respected. People will rewrite your character to fit their pain. They will call your strength cruelty, your silence arrogance, your detachment betrayal. Let them. Their words change nothing. Reputation is noise. Reality is leverage. And the reality is this. A man with unshakable standards is safer, stronger, and more respected than the man who drowns in the illusion of kindness. These 5 rules form the skeleton of cold-blooded intimacy. They transform relationships from systems of exploitation into systems of balance. They teach people that your love is valuable, not free. They show that your patience has a ceiling, that your forgiveness has a cost, and that your silence has meaning. When you live by them, you no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer chase validation. You no longer trade power for comfort. You embody Machiavelli's true lesson. That power is not in the loudest words, but in the quietest consistencies. And when people finally realize that your rules are not flexible, that your standards are not for sale, they face a choice: evolve or leave. Either way, you win. Because you are no longer a servant to their expectations, you are a strategist of your own position. Pain is inevitable. Betrayal is inevitable. Disappointment is inevitable. What separates the weak from the strategist is not whether they suffer, but how they process suffering. The average man takes betrayal personally. He collapses under its weight. He obsesses over questions like, why me? How could they do this to me? His pain becomes poison, consuming him, weakening him, making him desperate for validation from the very people who caused it. But Machiavelli would say, pain is never the end, pain is information. To the cold-blooded mind, betrayal is not tragedy, it is intelligence. And intelligence, when properly catalogued, becomes power. Every time someone lies to you, every time someone disrespects you, every time someone withdraws without warning, you are being handed a piece of data. You now know what they are capable of. You know what they value more than you. You know how far they are willing to go when self-interest outweighs loyalty. The weak man interprets this as loss. The strategist interprets this as clarity. He asks, What does this betrayal teach me about their limits? He doesn't spiral, he doesn't chase, he observes, he absorbs, he adjusts. In the Machiavellian mind, pain is not a wound, it is a map. And if you learn to read it, it guides you toward stronger positions. Consider this. When you react to betrayal with fury, shouting, or revenge, you may feel powerful in the moment, but you reveal your weakness. You've shown your enemy exactly which button to push, exactly how to unbalance you. You've surrendered control of your timing, your stillness, your advantage. Predictable anger is not dangerous, it's pathetic. People respect what they cannot predict. And nothing is more intimidating than the man who sees betrayal and does not flinch. The man who does not rage, does not chase, does not cry. The man who withdraws quietly, who recalibrates silently, who removes access not with chaos, but with indifference. That man is feared, because his silence carries weight. His absence burns deeper than his presence ever did. Machiavelli would tell you, power is not the strongest emotion. It is the strongest timing. Anger is fast, pain is fast, reaction is fast, but strategy is slow. And slowness terrifies people, because when they wound you and you do nothing, they begin to wonder, what is he planning? When will he move? Has he already moved and I just don't see it yet? Their own fear becomes your weapon. You don't need revenge, you don't need shouting, you need patience. Because patience, applied with precision, creates paranoia. And paranoia is far more effective than rage. So how do you turn pain into power? You master the art of cataloging. Every disappointment, every disrespect, every betrayal gets filed away, not in your heart, but in your strategy. You stop asking, why did they do this? And start asking, what does this teach me? Did they reveal they value comfort over loyalty? Did they show that guilt is their weapon of choice? Did they expose that your forgiveness is their expectation? Each betrayal is a blueprint, and with each blueprint you refine your walls, your filters, your access. This transformation requires one shift. Stop personalizing pain. The weak man says, they hurt me because I wasn't enough. The strategist says, they hurt me because that's who they are. One mindset collapses into self-doubt. The other transforms into self-protection. One becomes a victim. The other becomes untouchable. Machiavelli knew this. People will always act in their self-interest. You cannot stop them, but you can design your world so that their self-interest no longer collides with your destruction. That is what it means to turn pain into power. Every cold-blooded strategist builds a strategic pain mindset. This means that whenever pain arrives, you slow down instead of speeding up. You pause instead of reacting. You measure instead of spiraling. You take what was meant to break you and repurpose it as insight. Betrayal reveals who is willing to lose you. Disappointment reveals who never valued you. Disrespect reveals who must never have access again. And with each revelation, you become stronger, colder, more precise. Pain becomes your teacher, not your master. Do you know what terrifies people most? Not anger, not shouting, not revenge. What terrifies them is indifference. When you absorb their betrayal with silence, when you remove access without warning, when you act without explanation, they are left in the dark. They cannot predict you anymore. They cannot manipulate you anymore. They cannot find the wound to press because you've hidden it behind steel. Indifference is the ultimate form of control. It tells the world, I am not moved by your chaos. I am not broken by your absence. I am not defined by your betrayal. That is the essence of turning pain into power. So remember this, the pain you feel is not weakness, it is raw material. You can drown in it or you can forge it into armor. The choice determines everything. The weak man will cry, chase, and repeat the cycle. The strategist will absorb, calculate, and evolve. And when the world realizes that their betrayal only sharpened you, only made you colder, only made you more untouchable, they will fear crossing you again. Because the man who transforms pain into power is the man no one wants to betray twice. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable. Every philosophy must end in practice. Every warning must crystallize into habit. Machiavelli never cared for abstract theories. He cared for results. And results in matters of power come not from what you believe, but from what you repeat. Being cold-blooded is not a single choice made in anger, nor a temporary mask you wear until comfort returns. It is a lifestyle, a system, a discipline etched into your daily behavior until it no longer feels like effort, it feels like identity. The weak man reacts, the strategist rehearses. He builds rituals so consistent that betrayal, disrespect, and disappointment no longer shake him. They only activate the framework he has already designed. That is the Machiavellian finish line, not to think about power but to embody it. Habit 1. Move without emotional announcements. Most men weaken themselves by announcing every shift. I'm cutting you off. I need space. I'm focusing on myself. These speeches are nothing but warnings to those who already exploit them. They give the other side time to prepare, time to counter, time to manipulate. But true boundaries don't need captions. They are written in consistency, not conversation. When you are cold-blooded, you don't announce withdrawal, you vanish. You don't explain slower replies, you simply slow down. You don't declare detachment, you embody it. And when questioned, you offer no essays, no monologues, only silence. Because silence cannot be argued with. Silence creates paranoia. Silence forces people to wonder whether they've lost you forever. That fear is far more powerful than any declaration. Habit 2. Stay polite, never over-familiar. Warmth when given freely becomes worthless. Familiarity breeds contempt, especially when it is unconditional. The cold-blooded strategist understands that his presence must always carry weight. So he greets with composure, compliments with purpose, exits before his energy is drained. He does not give constant access. He does not allow his kindness to become routine. He shows just enough warmth to remind others of his humanity, but never so much that they forget his authority. Politeness keeps him respected. Over-familiarity makes him exploitable. And in the Machiavellian framework, the difference between respect and exploitation is razor thin. Habit 3. Reflect before reacting. Impulsive men are predictable men. Predictable men are weak men. The cold-blooded strategist never allows emotion to move before thought. When disrespected, he does not snap. He observes. When lied to, he does not spiral. He calculates. When betrayed, he does not chase. He catalogues. This pause, this internal filter, is what makes him dangerous. Because while others are busy shouting, sulking, or panicking, he is still. And stillness under pressure terrifies people. It tells them, you cannot move me. You cannot provoke me. You cannot access the emotional levers you once controlled. Reflection is not passivity. Reflection is weaponized patience, and weaponized patience wins wars without lifting a blade. Habit 4. Never reopen what you closed without requalification. Weak men romanticize the past. They leave relationships, but when nostalgia rises, they crawl back. They accept apologies without change. They confuse time with growth. But Machiavelli would laugh at this weakness. Time does not heal betrayal. Standards do. The cold-blooded strategist understands this. If he left, it was for a reason. And if that reason hasn't been addressed, then nothing has changed. Re-entry is only granted when the other side has requalified, when their actions, not their apologies, prove evolution. Otherwise, the door remains shut. This is not cruelty, it is self-respect. And self-respect, once compromised, is almost impossible to rebuild. Habit 5. Treat your peace as a strategy, not a statement. In today's world, people love to advertise their boundaries. They post about cutting off toxic people. They declare, I'm protecting my energy. But these announcements are performances, not protections. The cold-blooded strategist never markets his maturity. He doesn't need to. His silence, his absence, his refusal to re-engage, that is the only statement he needs. His peace is private. His detachment is invisible. He protects deeply but quietly, never giving the world a script to use against him. Because the moment you announce your boundaries, manipulators will find ways to twist them. The moment you market your peace, you've already weakened it. Strategy does not need applause. It needs results. When you live by these habits, something remarkable happens. People begin to realize that the old version of you, the one who over-explained, overgave, is gone. And they react with discomfort. They accuse you of changing. They mourn the loss of their easy access. They label you cold, detached, heartless. But you understand, their pain is not a reflection of your cruelty. It is a reflection of their loss of power. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that allowed them to act without consequence. And now that version is gone forever. Machiavelli would tell you, if you need others to approve of your evolution, you have already surrendered the freedom to evolve. You will be misunderstood. You will lose people. You will be accused of cruelty. But these are the natural costs of power. And the strategist accepts them without hesitation, because the goal is not to be liked, it is to be unmovable. The goal is not to be praised, it is to be respected. The goal is not to remain endlessly warm, it is to remain untouchable. This is the Machiavellian finish, total power, enforced not with chaos, not with cruelty, but with consistency. Your silence becomes your edge, your presence becomes your filter, your standards become your fortress, and your peace becomes your throne. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to beg for it. You simply live it. And when the world adjusts, when they realize you are no longer easy to move, you will see the transformation. Fear will return. Respect will follow. And love, the kind that is earned, not assumed, will finally appear. You have now seen the full framework. You've walked through the trap of love, where unconditional giving turns into predictable weakness. You've uncovered the hidden tests, the entitlement, the guilt, the loyalty loop, the just this once, the accusations of harshness that people closest to you use, often unconsciously, to measure how far they can push you. You've learned the cold-blooded solution, to love with boundaries sharp enough to cut, to forgive only when reform has occurred, to act with silence instead of justification. You've studied the rules of power in intimacy, rules that, when enforced consistently, make your love valuable instead of assumed. You've discovered how to turn pain into power, transforming betrayal into intelligence, disappointment into clarity, disrespect into evolution. And finally, you've reached the Machiavellian finish, a system of habits so deeply ingrained that your cold-blooded strategy becomes your natural state. But here is the truth Machiavelli would want you to remember. None of this matters if you treat it as theory. None of this will change you if it remains words on a page, or lines in a video, or ideas you agree with but never practice. Power is not given to thinkers. Power is taken by strategists, and strategy is nothing more than repeated habits stacked consistently over time. That means the next time someone tests your patience with guilt, you pause instead of folding. The next time someone disrespects your boundaries, you vanish instead of negotiating. The next time pain comes, you catalog instead of collapsing. Small shifts, repeated daily, transform you from the man who is easily bent to the man who cannot be moved. Of course, this transformation has a cost. You will be misunderstood. People will call you cold. They will accuse you of being arrogant, selfish, detached. They will miss the version of you who bled on command, who gave without limit, who forgave without reform. And they will mourn the loss of their advantage. That mourning will sound like criticism, like judgment, like gossip. But you must understand, none of those reactions are proof of cruelty. They are proof that you've evolved. They are confessions that the game has changed, that the rules are different, that the leverage is no longer theirs. Machiavelli would say, let them speak. Their discomfort is the sound of power shifting. And yes, some people will leave. They will exit your life because the old version of you, the one who carried their chaos without complaint, no longer exists. Let them, because when you enforce your value, only those who can rise to it will remain. And those are the only people worthy of your loyalty, your energy, your love. Cold-blooded strategy does not kill love. It filters love. It ensures that the warmth you give flows only to those who respect its cost. And in doing so, it protects you from becoming another casualty in someone else's game of convenience. So now the choice stands in front of you. You can stay the man you've always been, predictable, soft, endlessly forgiving, or you can step into the discipline of being cold-blooded. You can choose to keep bleeding for everyone else's comfort, or you can decide that your peace, your boundaries, and your power are worth more than their approval. This is not about cruelty. It is about control. It is not about detachment. It is about direction. It is not about becoming heartless. It is about protecting your heart with precision. And here's where you act. If this message hit you, if you recognized yourself in the traps, the tests, the mistakes of leading with love, then it is time to commit to change. Do not just nod and agree. Do not just say, "This was powerful." Put it into practice. Start today, cut the explanations. Enforce the consequences, catalog the betrayals, build the habits, and become the strategist of your own life. Now I want you to prove to yourself, and to this community, that you are serious about evolution. Drop a comment below and tell me, which test have you failed the most? Entitlement, guilt, loyalty, just this once, or the fear of being called harsh? Share it. Because when you name your weakness, you begin to strip it of power, and when you share it here, you'll realize you are not alone. Thousands of others are on the same journey to becoming untouchable. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable. If this video spoke to you, then subscribe to The Cold Strategist right now. Because this is not just a video, it is a blueprint for a lifestyle. Every week we dive deeper into Machiavellian psychology, power dynamics, and the mindset shifts that turn weakness into dominance. If you want to stay soft, keep scrolling. But if you're ready to build a mind that cannot be bent, then hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a movement of men who refuse to be predictable. And one last thing, if you are ready to take this to the next level, check the pinned comment below. I've left a resource there that will sharpen your thinking even further, a tool to reinforce the very habits we've discussed. Don't ignore it, because evolution requires weapons, and every strategist knows the importance of having the right tools. Remember, being cold-blooded is not about losing your heart. It's about protecting it. It's about ensuring that your warmth, your love, and your loyalty are never wasted again. That is the Machiavellian finish. That is the path of the cold strategist. Walk it, and the world will never see you the same way again.